Hey, how's everyone doing out there? Welcome to a Word Hole Media presentation of Major League A-Holes in the Hole and Socks Top Thing. I'm Pete.
I'm Ryan. You are in the hole with Major League A-Holes and Socks Type Thing at MajorLeagueAholes.com and SocksTypeThing.com. And on YouTube, check out our YouTube channel. It's blowing up these days. Subscribe once you get over there. That's the best for us. So please. We have a jam-packed episode for you tonight. We're going to do things completely opposite from what we normally do. We're going to start on the West Coast tonight. We're going to start with the Oakland A's. Maybe soon to be the Las Vegas A's. They just released some new renderings, new renderings. This is the third set of renderings I've seen already for Las Vegas, but they might be more concerned. They should be more concerned though with a series of protests, boycotts, and movements against their move away from Oakland that they will be dealing with all summer. It's already being called the Summer of Sell. It's going to be an interesting time where the Oakland A's fans are not taking this lying down, and they might actually have a plan to stop this from happening. I'll chronicle that. We're going to switch over to the other side of the bay and talk about the big signing of Matt Chapman with your Giants. We're also going to tie that into how a lot of Tigers fans and media are not happy about this signing of Matt Chapman. They think he should have come to Detroit, which I think is ludicrous, but what can you do? After that, we will talk about your White Sox, who have new stadium news to talk about. Very confusing situation. You definitely wanted to talk about this, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say because I'm baffled by what's going on here with a potential partnership with the Bears. Strange. I've actually got a theory about all of this, though.
Well, you broke the reason this is happening last week. So,
what did I do? I broke it.
You broke the story on why this is happening. It's that law.
Oh, the tax.
Yeah,
I didn't break that news, but yeah, that's the true mitigating factor why this is all happening in the first quarter of 2024.
But, right.
Finally, for the first time ever, I think we're going to wrap up the show with a Cubs segment, which I think they're usually in the top half of the show. But I've got my top storylines I'm watching going into the 24th season, and a really weird article with Chris Bryant was released in the Athletic this week that I want to break down. That kind of confirms some things that you and I and many people have been suspicious of all along since he moved to Colorado. I think we might as well go ahead and jump into the news. So have you seen the latest Las Vegas Athletics stadium renderings?
I sure have.
Obvious connotations to the Sydney Opera House in Australia. I mean, have you been to Australia?
I have.
Told me you went there once.
I have.
Did you go to the Opera House?
I went to like
you can walk through it.
Yeah, we went over there to it's amazing architecture. We went over to look at it, and then you can walk through the Opera House when there's not a event happening, and there wasn't an event happening, so we took a peek inside, and and that's immediately when I saw the renderings. I thought, okay, I guess it works for Vegas, but it's really odd looking stadium as far as I'm concerned.
Well, when you were in the Opera House, did you think they should be playing baseball inside of it?
God, no. No, yeah, exactly.
There's an uncanny resemblance, which is fine, whatever. But they also did, the architect actually called it on purpose. They called it an armadillo sphere, which the armadillo part is obvious too. You could definitely see armadillo. It's like a pile of armadillos on top of it, kind of like a armadillo orgy almost. But that's what they were going for, I guess. It's fine. It's raised a lot of questions about the design in general, but the bullet points here is it's a 33,000 seat stadium, which we've heard before. Not a retractable roof, which we had heard in previous iterations of what the stadium was supposed to be. So that was a bit surprising. It is featuring the world's largest cable net glass windows, which I'm not quite sure what cable glass net means, but it's a giant fucking window. Basically, the whole north end of the building is all windows, which, I mean, you think of a glass building, it's really a greenhouse in a way, which seems like there could be a warm place. They're going to definitely have to work on the air conditioning system there, but It's a greenhouse. Maybe that's going to be the nickname for it. The greenhouse. Oakland A's, or now the Las Vegas A's, are green. I think it makes perfect sense.
Oh yeah.
That or the armadillo brothel. I don't know. Maybe that'll make more sense. But so I read some of the quotes, and there's one quote in particular I wanted to point out when I was reading about this. The ballpark is currently designed to include an 18,000 square foot jumbotron, which would make it the largest in all of MLB. And my favorite thing about this is it is currently designed to feature this jumbotron, which is sort of the whole farce of all these renderings we've seen over the years. Like I said, this is probably the third set of renderings I've seen for Las Vegas alone.
Yeah.
That does not include the myriad renderings you've seen for the Howard Terminal spot on the East Bay. Prior to that, I mean, there's Fremont renderings, all sorts of different renderings. So these are essentially meaningless. Like, they can draw all the pictures they want, but none of this means anything until they actually get the funding and figure this out and put a shovel in the ground. So who knows if it's going to look anything like this. One thing that's obvious that it's not going to look like is they've also failed to show the new high-rise casino that's supposed to be on the same 9-acre plot. Those are not to be seen in any of the renderings. So it's obviously going to look very different. There's a giant building right next door to it as well. So it just raises questions, though. Like, can it even fit on these 9 acres, which is a very small plot of land for multiple buildings, let alone a stadium?
Right.
Are they going to be able to get this done by 2028? They don't have funding secured yet. They don't have, the taxpayer dollars of Nevada that they're looking for yet. So I find this all pretty dubious. It's still budgeted for $1.5 billion. I mean, I have no idea based on renderings. That looked like an expensive building to me. 1.5 might be a bit low.
Maybe it's all made out of
we know
plastic.
John Fisher. Yeah, exactly. Well, we always joke about the Texas stadium, the new Rangers stadium, how it was a lot of glass actually too, and it ended up looking like an aluminum tool shed. So renderings, you got to take with a grain of salt. The interesting part of this, well, the last part of this, at least this current stage, is there is a Las Vegas city board meeting scheduled for March 21st.
Oh, okay.
We will be learning a lot more about, like, this is where things get a little more real. I mean, there's endless meetings about this fucking thing, but we'll see how it actually plays out. We'll get a little more clarity, I think. But I think the A's are a little bit, they're trying to deflect, obviously, by releasing these renderings, trying to get everyone fired up about a new stadium in Las Vegas. But they should probably be a bit more concerned about what's going on in their own backyard, including opening day, which we talked about, the boycotts and protests scheduled for opening day, where fan groups are encouraging A's fans not to go to opening day, but instead attend a parking lot rally, protest and boycott right outside of the Coliseum, which we talked about a lot last week. But that's not the end of their protests. It's essentially going to be a summer-long series of protests. Similarly, maybe they're all in the parking lot. Maybe they are boycotting every game. We've seen last year, we saw the reverse boycott, where actually they encouraged people to actually go to an A's game, which they set records for last season's attendance, with planned, moments of silence at odd parts of the game, followed by "sell the team" chants, well choreographed. It was very well done. I applaud A's fan groups for doing all this, but I think that's the tip of the iceberg. The vitriol that this has turned up, and I wouldn't blame them. If my team was leaving, I would be joining all the same movements. So it's actually being summed up as the summer of sell. And that is not just a cool hashtag on social media. That's actually going to be a documentary film produced this summer. They have a couple of volunteer filmmakers are encouraging A's fans to send in their own footage of their protests and everything else. And they're going to compile this all into a documentary. I submitted a couple of our videos from our YouTube page to them, and they thanked us for that. So maybe we'll be in this in this documentary. Somehow I doubt it.
That would be wonderful.
They're encouraging fans across the nation to contribute. So I thought we'd be good for that, from contributing from Chicago and Detroit.
When Oakland comes into town, should we stage a Chicago boycott of
I think we could.
Oakland?
I think maybe we should. Maybe we should talk about that. Well, maybe we could plan. I haven't seen when they'll be in on the south side there, but that might be a good time for me to come into town.
Yeah.
If they play on a weekend.
Well, I mean, no one will want to go to the Sox game anyway to see the Sox, so it'll be easy for me to boycott it.
It won't be hard to get tickets. Yeah, I'm not worried about that. About 2 weeks ago, fans organized their own fan fest. They called it Fans Fest because they made it all. Of course, the A's and most teams canceled their fan fests during the pandemic, but they never returned. They never brought back the fan fest for obvious reasons. Similar to the White Sox, at least you guys have announced that Sox Fest will return in 2025. But it was an impressive. I saw some of the scenes from Fans Fest in Oakland, just fan organized, and there are reports of 20,000 plus people showing up to that. So it shows you there is a will for baseball to be in Oakland. The fans are there, and they're angry about losing their team, and I cannot blame them. I mentioned I did actually attend one of the A's Fan Fest back in would have been 2005. Where they actually hold the event in the stadium, which was kind of cool because you got to do a tour of the locker room and all throughout the stadium. By the way, the locker room in Moneyball, that's the real locker room.
Oh, okay.
When he's berating the players for dancing around and playing music after a loss. That's the real locker room. That's what, at least maybe they recreated it. I can't believe they couldn't just film in there, but that's what it looked like. So I thought that was kind of cool. The coolest thing I've seen Ace fans do for this whole thing, the most subversive thing, is they started a website. It's a protest website, but the name of the website is davekaval.com. And A's fans know exactly who this is. You might not be familiar, but David Kaval is the president of the A's. And they literally I call him the chief minister of propaganda for the A's because he's on Twitter just spewing propaganda and blocking the abuse. Anyone that like mildly abuses him on Twitter just gets blocked. So A's fans are posting their block status from Dave Kaval's Twitter feed as a badge of honor. I've actually tagged him and called him the minister of propaganda, but he has not banned us yet. So we'll see when that happens. I'll be sure to post that. But I just love the idea that these protesters took his name and are using it as the domain name for this protest site. Also, David Kaval. It sounds so much like cabal, which is like an evil conspiracy, like sinister group of people getting together. I just thought that he sounds like a bad dude, and he's certainly acting like a bad dude. The website puts together a really cool theory that I hadn't really considered, because I think in the last episode we were talking about the opening day boycott, and I love it. I want to support it as much as I can from 2,000 miles away. But what does it really mean? Like, is it going to change anything? Does it it would be an embarrassing scene if there's hardly anyone in the stadium, yet there's tens of thousands of people protesting outside on opening day, the most hallowed day of the baseball season.
Right.
It's more symbolic than anything, but what does it really change if the real power brokers have their money and they do what the fuck they want with it? But this davekaval.com has an interesting theory and has an interesting method to actually maybe create some change. I'll read directly from it. John Fisher is in dire financial straits, but he is looking to make a big payday by selling his half of the Coliseum for $150 million. I did not know he actually owned a piece of the Coliseum. And he's looking for $210 million more in TV money by playing in the Coliseum from 2025 through 2027. That's the part we talked about a couple episodes ago, where the only way that the A's contract with NBC Sports California will be honored is if they play in the Bay Area.
Right.
It's a $67 million per year deal. So if they were talking about moving to Las Vegas prematurely, playing in their AAA stadium, they wouldn't get that TV money. Even if they play in Sacramento, which we talked about, which was a viable option at one point, they would not get that $67 million. So that's where you and I were talking about them potentially playing in Oracle Park or whatever it's called now, where the Giants play, because they would obviously still be in the Bay Area, but I'm not really sure why the Giants would want to help them out, do them a solid necessarily. That just fraught with complications. But that's what they're getting at. They're getting at his money. He wants to continue to play in 25 through 27. That'd be with a lease extension of the current Coliseum lease that ends after this season. They continue. If Alameda County and the city of Oakland stop him from profiting off the Coliseum, he may not have enough money to build his stadium in Las Vegas and will be forced to sell. That's where this protest movement can actually do something. If they can put enough pressure on city and county officials, they could actually block the sale of the Coliseum, block his profits from that, and fuck up his financing. So that's where shit gets real. Because when you fuck with people's money, that's when you get their attention. So if you go to davekaval.com, you can sign up. You can send a petition to the Oakland City Council. I think you just sign your name to it and hit send, and it does it. I don't know what that does. I guess it just lets your congressman, your local councilman know you're out there. Obviously, I'm not a resident, so I don't think I should necessarily get involved in that. But maybe you can. Maybe we should just flood the ballot box. But I just thought that was a really interesting, kind of devious, really subversive, cool way to actually maybe make a real difference.
Yeah,
bravo A's fans.
Yeah, A's fans. They have a true desire to fix this situation.
Well, just think.
Make their voice truly be heard, because I deal with this very similar fan base, but they take no action. They buy
the White Sox.
The guys on White Sox Twitter who bitch, they buy season tickets still. What are you doing? Let your voice be heard.
Yeah.
Have 2,000 people start showing up to the ball games. We'll see something's going to happen then.
You started hearing "sell the team" chants at the end of last year, and that might continue throughout this season. It's hard to say. At least, I think. I mean, the public pressure certainly helped lead to the firing of your president and general managers. That maybe there is some effect, but you've come in the last few months, at least, talking about Jerry Reinsdorf potentially selling the team. That they might move to Nashville, or him threatening, new owners might move the team. You have had at least to put yourself in the same mind space that Oakland A's fans are feeling, that where the reality is so close that they could lose their team. Where I think White Sox fans might be able to relate a little bit more than others. So
yeah,
got to be careful out there. Don't let your owners run over you.
Too late.
Well, I think from there, we could move over to the other side of the bay if you want to do a little gigantism.
Yeah, and speaking of the Oakland A's, ex-Oakland A and also ex-Blue Jay, Matt Chapman is now a member of the San Francisco Giants, who have signed some... I guess Chapman's still somewhat of a power hitter. I mean, his numbers aren't what they used to be, but he still has a good glove at third base and a solid enough bat. Last
Very
year,
good glove.
17 homers, 54 RBIs, 108 OPS plus. So, not what he was doing in Oakland in his prime, where he was hitting 36 home runs in 2019. But it definitely shows that Pablo Sandoval will not be starting at third, so that's a relief.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how that's going to eventually pan out. Will he be there as a bench player? I don't know, but more to come on that. But I mean, I think it's a solid signing. I don't think it's like a huge signing. The part I do find funny, and you sent me this text, is Scott Boras was playing his cards again, and again he got Heisman'd by having to settle for a 3-year, $54 million contract, no like long-term 5-year deal. And it also very similar to the contract that Cody Bellinger signed with the Cubs, has a couple opt-outs, so if for some reason he can return to form after he gets $20 million this first season with the Giants, he has the ability to opt out of an $18 million and a $16 million again in his final year. So
yeah, I term that a win, like a win-win lose for the Bellinger contract. I thought the Cubs won on that. I thought Bellinger won on that, and I thought Boras lost on it because
right.
he's always getting his athletes to hold out for the most money, and they had to settle for shorter term deals than were rumored or expected. So same as the case with Chapman here. So I'd say Boras is 0 for 2 this offseason.
Yeah, and I think Boras needs to start realizing, which is odd that he hasn't after what we've seen like post-COVID off seasons. I mean, Blake Snell is still not signed.
Yeah.
And neither is Montgomery, which is crazy to me.
Yeah. World Series champion.
Yeah, there's not this desire for, like, teams are in no rush to give these guys big contracts. If your name's not Shohei Ohtani or you're not some sensation coming in from overseas, there's no urgency. There really is not any urgency. It's such a change. And I think Scott Boras, not that he's not going to get a decent cut of, I don't know how his money works out. I guess it works out for the total value of the contract. So, he's not going to be crying poor or anything, but
no, he's fine.
He's fine. But I think it's a new day and age, and any of these players whose track record isn't completely stellar or off the charts are not going to get these big, extended deals. I mean, there's a risk with Bellinger. He's been inconsistent the last few years. The Cubs know that they may have gotten the best season out of him. So why sign him to some long-term deal and be stuck with that contract? Same with Matt Chapman. He had a bit of a bounce back year last year because the year prior, like, what would he have? Was it like 11 home runs or something? So, it's not like, I apologize. That was 2020 where he had 10 home runs, but he had 27 in Oakland.
It was a short season.
2022, 27. But his like batting averages and OPS is like, had dropped off considerably the last few years, where he was normally like in the around 850. Now he's 100 points lower in OPS. So,
well, a lot of that was due to, I saw this one stat that may have, there was an article, I think probably in The Athletic, trying to explain why there wasn't as much of a market for him as you would assume. He got off to a great start last year, but the second 2/3 of the season, essentially 104 games, his OPS was 666.
Yeah, exactly.
So if he's in the 700s, he had a great first half, but it was bad after that. And I think that may have scared off some suitors, but he's also 31 years old. Bellinger's 20, or he's going to be 31 years old next month, I believe. Bellinger's 28. So there's differences, and it makes sense why they have similar contracts, but why the dollar values are quite a bit different. So
yeah, I mean, I like the signing. I wasn't like, oh my God, we got Matt Chapman. I was like, oh, okay, cool. That's decent. But it's definitely starting to solidify the offense now. I think there's going to be, a lot more threats in that offensive lineup now this year. And it's solidifying the infield defense, which we all know is very helpful to winning ball games. So I don't know. They're looking pretty good. I would love him to sign like a Blake Snell or a Montgomery to like really solidify the starting pitching staff, with then
Robbie Ray coming back.
Robbie Ray coming back like mid-season. I mean, that
you're fine.
It's starting to shape up pretty good. Right after the major Ohtani injury happens too at mid-season, it's gonna open the door for victory. So
that's evil.
I am evil. Yes, I am. Metallica via King Diamond. But anyway, so I'm happy with it. I'm not blown away by it. It's solid signing. Apparently, though, the Giants signing Chapman has caused a lot of hubbub in the Midwest, Smitty? The Detroit Tigers fans are outraged.
Yeah, I wanted to get to think and thank you for that perfect transition because with the connection between the Giants and Tigers fans is minimal, but for some reason, Tigers fans and especially media and social media are freaking out this week about Matt Chapman not signing with the Tigers. It's not maybe specifically Matt Chapman, but of course it drew everyone's ire when that news came out last week. It's sort of just the idea that the Tigers aren't spending shit tons of money, which
okay. I mean, now's not the time
yeah.
still.
Well, and that's my whole point. And I think it's great. It's fun when teams spend money in the off season, and we love it. I demand that out of my Chicago Cubs every offseason because they're in the third largest market in the country. They are a behemoth. They own their own goddamn television channel. They broadcast their own games. They are a money-making machine. They should be operating the way the Dodgers, Yankees, Mets, all those behemoths operate. That is not the same with the Detroit Tigers. And you can point to they're not even at $100 million payroll in their payroll right now. They're well below average. I understand that, but I think people are misplacing the point of emphasis or not understanding where the organization is in their process of becoming a competitive team. They're still building that. We are in the second year of the Scott Harris regime. Unfortunately, it is a much longer rebuild that was started by and failed by Al Avila, but we're entering a second rebuild. So it is a period of 7, 8, 9 years we've been doing this shit, and people are impatient, and I understand that. But it is not Scott Harris's duty to completely throw out the plan, spend a shit ton of money on potentially bad contracts that we have seen on many occasions in Detroit, and bury the franchise once again. He needs to be patient, and I think it's not fun fodder on social media to just preach patience or on the radio or anywhere else, or on a podcast. But I'm gonna fucking do it because it's the right thing to do. It's silly. It kind of got out of control last week when I first heard it with Jim Costa. 97 won the ticket in Detroit. He's the new host of the morning show there. He basically called this strike 2 on Scott Harris for not spending more money this offseason. He feels like this is a failure of an offseason. And it's not just the first strike against him in his second year. It's his second strike because he's holding the whole Eduardo Rodriguez trade, not trade debacle against Scott Harris as well. That was strike 1, he's saying. To which I would say, do you also give a strike to one of the most respected GMs and presidents in all of baseball, Andrew Friedman? Because he was equally blindsided by the bizarre behavior and decision making of Eduardo Rodriguez. In fact, you could argue it cost the Dodgers a World Series because they were planning on Eduardo Rodriguez to be in the rotation at the trade deadline. They were actually forced to be pitching one Lance Lynn in the playoffs because that was their only plan B. So it's not like Scott Harris was, some naive general manager that just got blindsided. Everyone in the industry is blindsided by what Eduardo, the weirdo, did in nixing the deal at the 11th hour of the trade deadline. So I thought that was really unfair of the biggest talk show in Detroit, the new host, just calling Scott Harris out on the carpet for that. Then just to automatically call it a strike against him because he didn't spend more money this offseason or spend it the way Jim Costa thinks he should have spent it. I think that's obnoxious. And that's just trying to get headlines and ratings as he's starting to host the new morning show. Like I said, it's a question of priorities and understanding where the organization is in its development. The Tigers happen to have a top 5 farm system. Basically anywhere you go, or top 10 at least. You could say they're in the top 10 of any measure. They have a good solid farm system, but it's not just that it's, talent that is years away. They actually have, of their top 16 prospects, 12 of them played at AA or AAA last year. They are banging on the door to get to this major league roster. It's not years away. Their top prospects are at the highest ends of the organization.
Their top prospects are on top.
Yeah. 14 of 14 of the 30 top prospects are projected to play in the majors this year. 14. Now that includes some that played last year that you still consider prospects, like Parker Meadows in center field, others like that. So it's not Colt Keith, of course, playing second, but
Colt Keith.
But that's an inordinate amount of player like prospects that are ready to come to the majors. So the thought process of of actually blocking those players with long-term deals for big name free agents makes no sense. And to judge the general manager for wanting to experiment and see what those players really have to offer, it's not seeing the big picture, and it's frustrating, but it leads to good ratings when you rip on the general manager. Just say you should spend money. You only have to look to Javi Baez in Detroit as a cautionary tale. We can see what that is. Last I saw, of course, can't put too much stock in spring training stats, but he's 0 for 12 last I saw the spring training, building on two of the worst seasons he's had or any top player has had in their career. We just got out from underneath the owner's contract of Miguel Cabrera, which people were complaining about the whole time. They wanted him off the roster. His $35 million was an albatross. Led to lots of joy watching his 500th home run, 3,000th hit. I got to witness the 3,000th hit, fortunately, very luckily. Those were fun times, but you knew that team wasn't going to be competitive. And now we're finally getting out from those deals. Unfortunately, Javi Baez has a long ways to go, but I don't want to block our prospects that have the potential to play huge roles with this team that is projected to finish around 500 once again this year, maybe a little bit better. They had, I believe, 78 wins last season. 82, 83 wins might easily be in the cards. And funnily enough, being in the shitty AL Central, that puts you in the hunt for the division. I think it's going to take, it might take 87 or 88 wins to actually do it. But if you're over 500 in the AL Central, you've got a shot. So I just, again, it's boring. It's bad podcasting to preach patience, but I want to see those prospects. I want to see who I consider one of the best managers in the game, AJ Hinch, to have roster flexibility where he can maximize matchups. He can bring up players that he thinks that will work in the lineup, but then he can move those players around, move them in and out of the DH role if they need to, however it needs to work. He's the master of maximizing matchups, as we've seen him use his bench. He doesn't even call it a bench essentially anymore, because every player plays in every game the way he makes pinch hitting moves and such throughout the game. So to tie his hands by automatically signing somebody like Matt Chapman, automatically being the third baseman, you take away opportunities from others. Specifically at third base, one of Tigers' top prospects is Chase Young, who is probably not going to be here in 2024, but he will in 2025 and 26 most likely. So that's a top prospect I just would not want to be blocked by Matt Chapman. You could say, well, he's got the 3-year contract he signed with your Giants. Maybe that same deal wasn't available to the Tigers. I don't know that he would have signed that same deal necessarily in Detroit. But if he opts out, that's great for you. He had a good season, but we've seen with Javi Baez and his deal, if he has a shitty season, you're stuck with him. So it's just the same thing that seemingly fans want to get into all over again with the same Javi Baez system. And it's foolish. I actually saw Barstool Detroit's, I think it's Chris Castellani, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. He was almost in tears with some diatribe he recorded and posted on social media about not getting Matt Chapman. How dare you? How dare you? It's just absurd. And it's just the easiest thing to do. Just demand your team to spend money. It's just not the right time.
I think it's bizarre behavior. I mean, why not see what you got there? You may not have to spend any money at all, except for these.
I'd like to check it out.
Yeah. I mean, you're not you're not putting anything at risk this year. Let it roll. Like you said, what'd you win? 83 games last year?
78.
78.
I'd like to win 83 this year.
Yeah, I think you're projected this year to win like 83 or something like that. So, I mean, not that those projections mean jack shit, but
yeah, we'll get into that maybe next week. But I just think to judge Scott Harris before a play's been made, before a pitch has been thrown in the season, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think if you want to like continue to rail on him for the botched trade or whatever, like let it go. It happened. I'm sure he had different information, and then we know from the history of Eduardo Rodriguez, like he's a flake. So
yeah, we did a whole segment on it. You can check it out on our YouTube page at Weirdo Rodriguez and the whole history of him taking a leave of absence to deal with family issues in his first season with Detroit. Just kind of skittish flake. Yeah, he's a flake is the best way to put it. You just don't know what he was going to do. Said at the time when he nixed the trade, he said he didn't want to go to the West Coast. And of course he signs with the Arizona Diamondbacks, very far from the East Coast and his family that he said he wanted to be closer to. So whatever.
Yeah. I mean, move on. Scott Harris is doing the right thing. And if the team's not controlling the opt-outs, like you said, signing a 31-year-old third baseman when you have all this talent that you need to find out now, because then next year or the year after, when the guys, your blue chip prospects are all in the prime age, then you say, Chase Young, you're not a third baseman for us. We're going to go sign, a slugging third baseman to replace you, because now we know. But to take this year and say they should have went and spent all this money is just, it's not seeing the forest through the trees, to use a cliche, because I'm just reiterating what you said. So I want to just put it from a White Sox perspective. When you have a talented farm system, you roll the dice, and I can tell you, it doesn't always work out, right? It doesn't always work out. All the sometimes the number one prospect in baseball is playing third base for you, getting $24 million. It's not very good, or is average. So, yeah. I mean, it doesn't always work out, but you need to find out why. You
give him a chance.
Yeah,
Jesus.
Give him a chance, and you got plenty of. I mean, you're only gonna you've seen it, like Torkelson's only going to be better this year, and he's going to be a lot better 2 years from now. So when he's a lot better 2 years from now, and who's your center fielder who gets injured all the time?
Riley Green's in right field now, but I think that's what you're talking about.
Riley Green, he's probably only going to get better. I mean, your pitching staff is obviously, arguably, one of the best young pitching staffs in baseball. When they can be healthy and out on the field. I mean,
yeah, if they're healthy, that's the key.
So there's all these the arrow, as I always say every week when I come in about the Tigers, the arrow's pointing up. Don't have it pointing sideways, guys. Let Scott Harris do his thing. Judge him 3 years from now. Judge him at the 5-year mark, and at that point, feel free to moan and bitch about it if they're not in the playoffs and things like that. But to judge him,
I think that's a wise rule of thumb. 5 years. I think that's a bit Pollyannish. I think after the season, maybe going to the third, certainly in the 4th year, I think is when he's going to really feel the heat. But for his second, or essentially his first off season with the club, it's ridiculous.
All right, shall we move on?
You brought up your White Sox cleverly. I think we might as well move over to the south side of Chicago.
Yeah, we've got some more wheeling and dealing going on, Smitty. Now,
lots happening over there.
Yeah, now this is the Chicago political and real estate machine getting together. Kurt Bailey, president of Related Midwest, the developer that's overseeing the 78, and for those of you who aren't familiar, the 78 is the parcel of land the White Sox want to build their stadium on. That's, was it 66 acres or something like that of undeveloped land, just a few blocks around 16th or 18th Street off of Clark. So
Clark, yeah.
He's also oddly enough the same developer that's working with the Bears. So
we talked about that a little bit, how the Bears got involved last episode, kind of strangely, but we were at that time, I was under the assumption it had been reported that the tax that you and I have talked about, the hotel tax, could be grandfathered in after this, would not be allowed to be grandfathered in after 2024, but it could only be applied to one stadium. Somehow now it can be applied to two different stadiums in the city of Chicago. So I'm kind of baffled by that. Maybe you know more about that.
Yeah, so it's not. It can be applied to one. I think the best way to put it, it can be applied to one financing deal.
Okay,
Of
but that
real
financing
estate.
deal could have multiple stadiums. Okay.
Yes, to have a. So what would Kurt Bailey, with Mr. Bailey, I feel like I'm
George
doing Mr.
Bailey.
Bailey. Your father was a work frustrated. Oh no, that's Mr. Potter. I'm just going to move on.
All right, enough references from 1945.
Yeah, that's why I can't get them. It's too old. But Bailey's trying to construct this deal because one part of the discussion that happened down when everyone went down to, when Jerry waddled down to Springfield with Bailey and his development group, was the fact that, well, we're not opposed to two stadiums, but we only want to broker one deal. So if the deal is done through Related Midwest, the developer, and the deal, whatever dollars those are used conjointly with both stadiums, then the state of Illinois would be open, according to the reports, to something along those lines.
I think it's important to point out that this is not two stadiums on the 78. This is a stadium. This is a White Sox stadium in the 78, and then another stadium built. Is it south of the current Soldier Field on the lakefront in the parking lot there? It'd be a big domed stadium.
Yeah, that's the other part of the proposal. The interesting part of all this is the stories that have been coming out in Chicago are that the White Sox are the half of this partnership that needs this partnership. The belief is if it was between the Sox and the Bears, the legislature in Illinois the Bears are going to win hands down, mainly because their plan is to have a dome and events and revenue can be done year round there.
They can make the city some money. Yeah,
they can make
it'd be a big money maker compared to open baseball stadium, but
yeah,
they could host, like, for instance, the Bears could host, Super Bowls for one thing. They could host Final Fours. They could host, like you said, year-round events, where that's just not the case with a new Sox Park 3.0. But so they're fighting with a hand tied behind their back.
Yeah, so apparently they're this Related Midwest is working to draw up some deal that they're going to present shortly down in Springfield again. At the end of the day, though, the same problem lies that it's still public funding. It doesn't matter that you're going to get two stadiums out of it. It's still, tax dollars are being paid by the people of Illinois.
Billionaires.
Two billionaires. I mean, McCaskies have a shit ton of money too. So it's like, I don't know. It's no better. But I think also when you said Jerry went down and asked for $1 billion, knowing he didn't need $1 billion so he could get his real money, I think this is what happened.
Yeah.
He gets like $400 million or something out of this split deal and goes off and builds his ballpark. And his legacy, as he sees it, is intact. So more to come on that, but I didn't even think we were going to be talking about this week, and then that story broke, earlier in the week. So
I think it's interesting to see how I think this kind of points out a sea change in how all the organizations are approaching this. Uh, Specifically, it seemed like Jerry Reinsdorf was the de facto face of this movement, the spokesman almost. He was happy to talk to legislators in Springfield and in the media about it, but he botched that so badly and turned public sentiment against him because just assuming that taxpayers should give him $1 billion, he came across so arrogant as he typically does. I think this marks a, a difference in approach suddenly now that the related Midwest group is kind of taken over the public face of this. And I think we're going to see less and less of Jerry just because he just botched it so badly. Nobody wants to hear a billionaire ask for billions of more dollars. So the other part of this that I find confusing, or probably maybe less confusing, you can sort of see right through it, is the Bears already own property out in Arlington Heights. They spent $200 billion on that, and they told the world that they bought that because they plan to build a dome stadium out there, and they would own that, which is a fantastic way for a very valuable organization to double or maybe triple their value, build a state-of-the-art brand new stadium and have that and own the property as well, and have that as another ridiculous money maker. This whole thing is so confusing, just having, like it's the two trying to combine forces to create two different stadiums with one financing deal through one developer. It's so convoluted and confusing. I think basically because it's just bullshit. It's obvious the Bears are just sort of throwing the idea out there that they'd like to remain on the lakefront and build something in the city, just as a leverage tactic to gain some leverage in their negotiations with Arlington Heights to lower their property taxes. I think that's all this is the Bears they were stunned somehow by the idea that Arlington Heights would raise property taxes on them after they bought the property out there.
Yeah.
That's how it works. But they didn't realize that somehow, and they already played their hand spending the money, purchasing the property and telling everyone they're going to build a stadium. And now they're realizing they fucked themselves by doing that. So now they're throwing this idea out there that they might move to the city or stay in the city. And Jerry Reinsdorf needs that, basically because, like you said, he's always going to play second fiddle to the Bears. He could use their leverage as well. If they could combine forces to help both of them, they'd be in a much better position. So there's a lot more going on than you can even easily surmise that they're just playing this for leverage. There's other things going on, but one interesting thing that it's been mentioned, but it hasn't been given much plausibility, is the owner of Related Midwest, which is part of the Related Group, which owns development companies all over the country, all over the world, actually. But the owner of all of the Related Group is one Stephen Ross, which you might know his name because he also owns the Miami Dolphins and other properties in the Miami area. He's actually from Michigan originally. He went to the University of Michigan, grew up in Detroit. I'm wondering if there's something else going on here where if we're in this kind of intimate business dealings between the White Sox, potentially the Bears, but I think it's mostly the White Sox, could Jerry be figuring out a way to potentially sell the White Sox to Stephen Ross, who owns sports franchises? He doesn't own a baseball team, but maybe he wants to. Or one thing to definitely point out is he's also 83 years old, not quite as old as Jerry, but does he want to purchase a baseball franchise for his family, for his legacy? Is that something that he has in mind down the road? He's worth a lot more than Jerry is and might be in the position to actually do this. He also happens to own the land where this new stadium would be built. So if he bought the White Sox, he would not only own the land that the stadium's on, he would own the stadium and the team. I've heard people mention it. It's not like an outrageous connection of the dots, but
Right.
it's been poo-pooed, which I'm kind of surprised that that's been so quickly poo-pooed, because it seems like a pretty savvy play by both Jerry and Stephen Ross. If he indeed wanted to get into the baseball franchise ownership game, this would be a perfect way to do it. So, and who knows what that means? I would think that'd be good news for White Sox fans, because Jerry's been throwing out that threat that if you don't build me this stadium, I'm going to die soon, and new owners will move the team wherever they want, potentially to Nashville. Well, if you sell to Stephen Ross, who owns the 78, and then would own the stadium and the team, they wouldn't be moving. So I wonder if that's something we're going to hear more about as this year plays out, because we will get an answer before 2024 is over.
Yeah, that's for sure, because they want to take advantage of this loophole in the taxes, the 2%. I guess we say, oh well, it's just 2%, but it's a lot when it's billions of dollars. So
Yeah, it's the hotel tax. So I mean,
yeah,
again, it's technically aimed at tourists, but at the same time, those tax dollars go to fund programs in Chicago and Illinois. So you are subverting those funds from going to schools or to education, or to whatever, to social programs, to give it to billionaires instead, for their playthings with sports teams. So it's a matter of priority, where those
yeah.
tax dollars go. It is not a new tax, so at least you wouldn't have that. But it's a question of where you're allocating those tax dollars.
Well, that's enough about this stadium
That's enough.
debacle going on.
Yeah, we talked a lot about stadiums and taxes and all sorts of shit
Yeah,
this episode already.
renderings. We say renderings a lot on this show now.
There's been a lot of
Renderings.
renderings on this show.
Renderings are everywhere. Well, how about we talk about quite possibly the greatest rebrand in sports history, the White
Are we
Sox.
actually moving over to an aesthetics segment?
Wait, what? Is that what we're calling this? Is this considered aesthetics?
It might be aesthetics.
So, by the way, this this segment has been in the works for like, I don't know, 6 months, but we're finally getting around to it.
Yeah, we just never got to it.
We just
Yeah.
never got to it last August or September, when this documentary was released. And the documentary I'm talking about is Fitted in Black, the story behind the blending of the hip hop culture and the Chicago White Sox rebrand. And, the documentary is kind of perfect because it's about 20 minutes long. And honestly,
Yeah, I
that's
didn't even realize
all
that at
that's all
first.
you really needed for it. It didn't need to be like an hour long, drawn out with you know clips of the team playing that year that are completely disconnected from the actual story at hand.
There's a little bit of that, but they do a good
Yeah,
job of limiting it and making it relevant, at least showing the uniforms and stuff. But
yeah, showing the shitty uniforms, and they were in very shitty uniforms right before the rebrand, with that stupid script C on the hat that
yeah, the
looks like
late
an E.
'80s. Yeah, it looks like
Yeah.
it looked like it could have been a Cleveland Indians uniform of that era.
Yes. Yes, it was they were in terrible shape. And the story does a really good job of setting up the rebrand, and 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 how they made the decisions on the rebrand, which I thought was like super interesting, on how they actually like brought the samples of what the uniforms are going to be to parties in the like Bridgeport area, where fans
Yeah,
were
that was
at,
awesome.
to see what their reaction was. And everyone gravitated to the pinstripes with the socks that were all sort of
They
driven
were
by.
I couldn't believe they were considering a blue and silver version of the familiar uniforms we are now, and that's what they were going to go with. But these focus groups they had at Southside Chicago block party said, no, man, you got to go black and white, black and silver, not navy and silver.
Yeah, and that
And
it
that was the
was
right move.
yeah, because they had consulted what are the hot colors, and it was black, silver, and navy. So they did the two different versions of the jersey. What what I what no one anticipated was how hip hop was going to, and the general public going to gravitate towards the cap. I mean,
and I think it's important to point out how hip hop was like the emerging pop culture phenomenon. That was new in the late 80s and early 90s. That had been
right.
emerging throughout the mid 80s. But you kind of take hip hop for granted these days, but that was a new coolest thing at that point. And it seemed like everyone in the hip hop community immediately gravitated to the Sox hat, the black hat, the uniforms, all of that. It kind of merged at the perfect moment, like all came together.
Yeah, I mean, just to put it in perspective, the statistic they use in the New Era produced 9,000 White Sox
Yeah,
caps the year prior to the rebrand. The year of the rebrand, they produced 550,000 White Sox caps. That that's
they
insane. It's fucking insane.
it was definitely they were definitely number one in merchandise sale and MMLB for that season. So
They told that story of Reinsdorf while in Arizona goes in to buy a cap and thinking I'm going to be able to just walk in and buy a cap because I'm in Arizona
no,
and there's none on the shelves. And he asked the gentleman what was going on, and he's like, I can't keep them in stock. If I could get them, I could just keep selling them, but they don't have them. They're
they
just
can't even make
gone.
them fast enough.
I couldn't even make
You
them
can
fast
thank
enough.
Dr. Dre for that. I think you
Yeah.
can thank Dr. Dre for that. And the Chronic, the Sox hat prominently featured. Ice Cube is actually part of the documentary. He's all throughout. I thought that was really cool because you see him all throughout all his videos. I think Easy E, NWA, they all had it. But I think the cultural zeitgeist really reached its crescendo with the Dr. Dre Chronic.
Yeah, that was really that Ice Cube talked about why he went with the Sox cap, and it was, they were coming out of NWA and they were always wearing Raiders caps, and he didn't want to, still be tied back to like the NWA's stigma. And this cap hit the market and it had all the points in the cap, the old English lettering. And he talked about how they would put their own old English like iron-ons onto shirts and stuff like that, on the t-shirts. They do them themselves. So it was like a no-brainer. It was a no-brainer for him. I also thought it's kind of cool, like when his first moment on camera, he like walks on the set and like puts the cap on and he just bends the brim of the cap just a little bit. He's like, yeah, that's how you wear it. That's like that's the fit. The Big Hurt, of course, is on the documentary, and there is that funny little exchange between him and Dr. Dre in LA that he talks about how he walked into a restaurant and Dr. Dre was there and he's wearing a Sox cap and he didn't even know what to say to him, because he's like, holy shit, Dr. Dre's wearing my cap, the cap we wear. So that was kind of cool. They also did ask, yeah, go ahead.
I thought it was important that Frank pointed out, like, part of it is if the Sox were shitty at that moment, it kind of would have fallen flat no matter what hip hop culture was doing with it. But Sox were good, and Frank took credit for that too. Like, this wouldn't have happened necessarily if we were a shit team. That's when you're on the rise at that point. So it all kind of worked. It was amazing how it all kind of worked together in unison.
It was a perfect storm, as they say, Smitty. A perfect storm.
Ah, yes.
They did ask Ice Cube if he should be credited with the rise of the Sox cap, and he did. He said, "Well, maybe in the hip hop community, but I think Big Hurt's one of the reasons the popularity of the cap and the jersey and everything." To your point, just backing up your point, you're right. The Sox were a young, fun team on the rise. And, every Sox fan looks back at 94 with the strike that their owner helped lead and how he fucked up his own chances of maybe winning a World Series 10 years, 11 years prior to when he actually won one. So who knows how that would have. I did a whole segment, was it last year, on if I could go back in time, how I would. Oh no, that was Hawk Harrelson. It wasn't the strike. It was if he had
Oh,
had
stop Hawk
fired.
from taking over?
Yeah, yeah, stop Hawk from taking over and firing La Russa. That would have saved us from the second La Russa stint.
That's right.
But I also think there's another moment in time that if you could have prevented Jerry from spearheading a baseball strike, that White Sox nation may have been treated to one extra World Series, or at least some sustained playoff appearances. But that was not the case. So, from a documentary standpoint, I kind of think it was perfect. I would give it, if we're rating aesthetics, 2 middle fingers up. I think it was a story well told. So
I was like you said, I was expecting it to be an hour. I didn't realize. I just pulled it up on the White Sox website. I didn't even pay attention to how long it was going to be. But yeah, 20 minutes was perfect. It's a tight documentary, and there's no fill. I like that they talked about the designers, as I am a graphic designer as well. They complimented. I don't even know if they named the designer, but the original design of the Sox logo that's right over your shoulder there and on your hat, it was done back in the 50s, a very similar version of it. But when they decided to do this rebrand in it must have been 89. They took that same logo and just sort of cleaned it up,
yeah,
streamlined it. They actually showed the minor changes they made to the different letter forms in the Old English SOX, which I thought was
yeah,
really cool. Like I'm the only one there are very few that necessarily care about that, but I thought that was cool. They gave some time to that, to like what they actually changed and how it was. It's not just a logo that came out of nowhere. It's something they had used throughout their history, but it had been improved and implemented in the most perfect way possible. I think it obviously time has shown that this is a 35-year-old rebrand now, and it is still looks as representative and perfect for your brand as you could possibly imagine. So that's one thing. I mean, I hate the White Sox, but I can never complain about what you guys' uniforms look like. Based on the black and white pinstripes, even with your City Connect uniforms, I've given you way
that's
too many
right.
compliments for,
That's right.
but I'm jealous in a way, I guess, a little bit. Not necessarily of the Old English D, because I think that is still superior, or the white home uniforms, but there's more that can be done, I think, and we'll see what the Tigers do with their City
Yeah.
Connect uniforms this summer.
For those of you watching us on YouTube, if you look at this, because this was like the 77 uniform, you can see how weird the S is compared to what they changed it to. And this is obviously one of the, to just, show what Smitty was talking about. They cleaned up all the wiggly lines and things like that. And they straightened everything
They
out.
made the
So,
X. They actually showed that they made the X a little more symmetrical, which is a
yeah,
principle of design, which is for dorks like me. It's fun to see. So yeah, I was impressed. But yeah, it's a cool documentary. I would definitely give it 2 middle fingers up.
I'm going to throw a curveball here. I got one more somewhat White Sox related thing I forgot to put on the list, but I remembered it
That's all right.
during the White Sox segment, so that's kind of good. But I just want to
So it's
send
not
out.
really shit Pete forgot. It's shit Pete forgot, but then remembered during the right segment. So it's
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah. There you go. I
Well done.
just wanted to send out my condolences to Lucas Giolito, who
Ooh.
season ended before it could get started. It looks like he's got a torn, was it a UCL
Is he
or
with the Red Sox now? Is
yeah,
that
he's
where he
with the Red
landed?
Sox and decent contract, 2 years, like I think 10.5 million or something. But looks like he is
Yeah, that
going
sounds
to
right.
miss the entire season. It sounds like a very White Sox thing to happen. So
Mm,
apparently that little gray cloud followed him all the way to Boston. So I do.
thanks.
I'm not doing this segment as in a snarky, sarcastic way. I love Lucas Giolito.
Yeah.
So I wish him the
No, I
best,
didn't. You didn't sound sarcastic.
but wanted to point that out. It's a tough blow for someone who's a pretty cool dude. So best of luck to you, Gio.
Yeah, he had a rough second half of the season after he was traded to Los Angeles,
Yeah,
and then to have this, he's kind of in a spiral, but he'll be all right. He's got money at least. So, yeah, that was tough news to see, but it kind of wasn't too surprising, I guess, with just the kind of cloud that has followed former Sox pitchers, including Carlos Rodon and whoever else. But not your problem anymore.
that's right.
Well, I'm going to transition us over to the north side of Chicago. If you're ready.
That's all for me. I'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever waited to the end of the show to talk about the Cubs. So this is your first opportunity to just walk away and I could finish the show. But then you would truly be a Major League a-hole.
I know. Maybe I should then.
You motherfucker. Don't you do it.
Maybe I'll just shut my camera off for this segment.
Yeah, fuck you. Well, like I did last week with my Tigers, I just wanted to touch on like major top storylines that I'll be watching for the 2024 season. The first of which would be, which Cody Bellinger are we going to get? I've talked about it many times, but he is the ultimate Jekyll and Hyde of baseball players right now. He's either the MVP or he is the worst batter in baseball. He was tremendous for the Cubs in the first 5 months of the season and then fell off a cliff in the last month. I'm just really curious to see how that plays out now that they've signed him. I didn't think it was a mistake to sign him. I thought it'd be a huge mistake to sign him to a long-term guaranteed deal of 6 or 7 years. Shorter term deal is something that Cubs can absorb, but if he can produce the way he did the first 5 months, the Cubs are in good shape. But if he reverts back to what he was, being dominated by velocity at the end of last season, it's going to be trouble because he was the engine of that offense for 5 months at least.
Yeah, I mean, coming to the Cubs, his slugging percentages were .455 in 20, .302 in 21, and .389 in 22.
Slugging percentage?
Yes. His OPS
Yikes.
2022 was .654. He's terrible.
Yikes.
He's fucking terrible in LA. That's why he couldn't get a long-term contract, because he had 3 horrific years with the Dodgers before coming to the Cubs. The Cubs are sitting in a
Cubs got him for a year.
Yeah. I mean,
17 million.
I think he can do what he, at least get around what he did last year. I don't see why he can't, but there is a question. I mean, there is a huge question mark with the guy. I mean,
that's why I'm bringing it up.
It's crazy. I know 21 was a shortened season, but his OPS plus was 44. 81.
What was his? Do you have his OPS for last season?
Yeah, it was 881.
I thought it was way over 8, but OPS plus has to be like 120,
133.
Jesus, yeah. So even with that bad last month, my God.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's why it's not a bad deal for.
No, I don't think you
just don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah, they're just like it's the reason. Like that's the reason why the deal is the way it is. That's all that needs to be said. I'm not going to say anything else. We all you look at those numbers and you say that's why it's the way it is.
Yeah, we talked about it last week. It made sense for both parties. Worked for everybody except for maybe Scott Boras. So no one feels bad for. My number 2 storyline, actually, these are just questions now that I realize it going into 2024. But what is the Craig Counsell effect? What effect will that really have on the team? Is it they got rid of their well-liked and respected manager that you and I thought overachieved as manager last year with the Cubs, as they were projected to only win 77 games, I think.
Agreed.
He was well above that. So how much further above that will the guidance of Craig Counsell be? I think there's potential to be more, but there's always debate on what a manager is really worth. Is it worth 5 wins? Is it worth 5 losses with a shitty manager? It's so hard to quantify, but and it's still going to be impossible to quantify even after the season, unless of course somehow they win the World Series. You're going to say it was the best managerial decision anyone's ever made. So it's never going to be necessarily answered throughout the season, but it's just going to be a question that's out there. How is he affecting it? I think one thing we will definitely see is there will be less bunting. As David Ross is my biggest criticism of him was he was ready and willing to give up outs at the drop of a hat, which is a frustrating thing for anyone that pays attention to analytics. I don't think we'll see that with Craig Counsell. So I also have faith that he can manage the bullpen throughout the season, so it won't run out of gas the way it did in September last year. He's done it before, so hopefully he can manage it. I guess this could all be answered in September. If the Cubs are running out of steam, if they've had a good season, and then fall flat like they did last year, or if they can avoid that. I think you got to give some credit to Craig Counsell. That might be the Craig Counsell effect.
Yeah.
Number
I don't
3 on my
know.
list. Go ahead.
No, I don't think Craig Counsell is going to make that big of a difference for the team, but
again, yeah, I think it's negligible. I think you could attribute success or failure to a manager that's not necessarily because of him. I guess it'll be interesting to see how those it's more narrative based than anything, but we'll see how those play out.
Yeah.
Next on my list is Justin Steele, a true ace. If he is an ace, this mitigates a lot of my consternation with the Cubs rotation going into the season that I think is not deep enough. But if he can really recreate what he did last year, if that's what he is going forward, the Cubs rotation is in good shape. The problem is that I've seen in many places where he's a prime candidate for aggression this year, which would be pretty devastating to what is already a thin rotation. If he is not what he looked like throughout most of last year, it would be trouble. It's going to be big trouble. And it doesn't matter how great a manager or how shitty a manager Craig Counsell may or may not be. If your pitching staff isn't there for you, there's not much you can do. So I think Justin Steele there's going to be a lot on his shoulders this year, and we'll see if he can deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, you're right about if the players don't perform the way they're supposed to perform, then the manager always gets blamed for it. So that it'll be on Counsell whether he deserves it or not. But you got again, Justin Steele went the route of Cody Bellinger last year, because over that last month of the season, his ERA was 6.75.
Mm-hmm.
He was not, his WHIP was 1.4.
Yeah,
so
that's where people are looking at the possible regression for 2024.
Yeah, so you gotta, he could have just been tired. It was his first full season, right? So I mean,
yeah, that's very plausible. But
yeah, could be may not even see that this year. So there, yeah, you're right. It's like you are presenting like it's just it's question marks, because if I expect him to start out just fine, but the question is how long can he keep that up, and we'll find out. But I mean, he was incredible at times last year. So
yeah, he's a beast. The potential is right there, and we've seen it. It's just a matter of maintaining it throughout the season and doing it year after year. That's what makes you an ace. My next question for the 2024 season is, can Christopher Morel play third base? If he can somehow play third base, that solves a lot of issues for the Cubs to find an easy way to get him in the lineup every day. If he can't, he's going to be a DH, which is very debilitating and kind of locks the lineup up. Doesn't lead to much flexibility or opportunity for others. Yeah, it's just amazing somebody with that much offensive potential that athletic cannot figure out how to play the field at any position they haven't found for him. They're trying their best to play him at third, and he had 2 errors yesterday alone at third base. It's just a disaster, and it's not changing. It doesn't feel like the Cubs are putting a brave face on it and putting their spin on it. Like they're saying, like Craig Counsell specifically said, we want him to make errors in spring training, so he can get that out of his system or learn from it, and not have those same situations happen in the regular season. But we still have never seen him be able to play a decent field position at all. So it solves a lot of issues if he can just be serviceable, maybe a little bit below average, but just not a disaster in the field. But we just have never seen it. So that's a massive question right there, because you want his bat in the lineup every single day with that kind of power. He might be their best power hitter already, which is it's just amazing. So
yeah, I was gonna say you need the bat in the lineup. I mean, his numbers were very similar to Cody Bellinger's last year from a power standpoint.
Yeah, he had 27 home runs in the majors, but he had 11 in the minors before they finally called him up. So there's obvious 40 home run potential, which is very rare in the league these days. So That's going to be fun to watch. It's certainly going to be interesting watching every ground ball hit his way. What's going to happen on that play? But the final question or storyline I have for 2024, who is Shota Imanaga, and can he adapt to the major leagues? What is he really going to be? Well, we've seen his career in Japan, but how does that translate in the majors? He is a fly ball pitcher, prone to giving up the home run.
Yeah,
He always has been.
We talked
He
about
is certainly not a fireballer. He lives around 90 miles an hour. He lives on guile, deception. The problem is giving up fly balls all the time could be a major problem in Wrigley Field or in the major leagues in general. If the wind's blowing in, it's not a problem. We'll see how that works, but it's just going to be really interesting to see how his skills translate to the majors, because you just never know. You cannot. You try to understand and extrapolate from a career in Japan how that's going to translate into the majors, but you just never know. So that he's really their number 3 starter, maybe number 2 starter at this point, and that's such a huge question mark to have at that point. That's also what puts a greater emphasis on Justin Steele being an ace to pick up that slack if there is any. So that's going to be fun to watch. Those are all things I am excited to see as we go into this 2024 Cubs season.
I'm excited for you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, the last thing I want to bring up tonight is an article I saw in The Athletic, and I think many read.
Yes.
Interview with Chris Bryant, former Cub legend, World Series champion, potentially one of the greatest at one point, one of the greatest careers in baseball history, as he was not only the college player of the year, he followed up the next year as minor league player of the year, made it to the majors and became rookie of the year, and followed that up with MVP and World Series champion. Probably the greatest 4 years of any young baseball player. No one's ever done it, so I don't think you could argue that. I was playing up the hype as much as I could on social media throughout those years, calling him Christ Bryant. He was clearly the second coming, the Messiah, bringer of another World Series finally to the Cubs, and he fucking did it. He did all those things. All that happened. And to see what has happened to him subsequently is puzzling, frustrating. We've questioned lots of things with Chris Bryant, and then when he eventually signed his 7-year, $182 million deal with the Colorado Rockies, kind of confirmed, or at least helped lead confirmation to speculation that people have had for a long time, is he just does not want the spotlight anymore. It's almost like he fell out of love with baseball because of the constant scrutiny in Chicago. He just left for a paycheck. And he signed with whatever team he could that was comfortable for him, that gave him millions and millions and millions of dollars. And this article, this interview with him, kind of confirmed all those things, which is, I don't know. I guess I don't know how to feel. It makes me kind of sad more than anything. Not to prove that we were right or that our speculation was right. I'd rather not hear that was true. But the whole article kind of bummed me out, which was strange. I've got a bunch of quotes here from it. The first part is he talks about the signing process and how he really didn't do his homework. He really just looked on the surface and just saw the biggest deal, 7-year, $182 million deal. He didn't really know much about the Colorado Rockies organization. Here's his quote. There were other teams interested, but I didn't want to wait around. It was a completely different situation for a lot of us free agents at the time. I guess I didn't do as much research into the prospects of the Rockies as I could have. Like he had no idea that they were a shitty organization. He just didn't care. It was just whatever team would give him the most money, he was just going to go to, because he's not really concerned with winning anymore. He got his championship and he's cashing in and checking out. There's more that actually corroborates that in the interview. He said, as a player, it's an easier spot to be in Colorado because you don't really have that outside pressure like the Dodgers are going to have. They invest a lot of money into good players, so they have to go out there and win. For us, we can be someone that nobody talks about. That's like a benefit to him, just like he can be anonymous and, not have to deal with any pressure. He literally just said there, he doesn't care about winning. He just wants to not have pressure on him and just go out and play. The problem is he's barely played in his 2 years in Colorado. He's been crushed by injuries, but you kind of wonder about his work ethic, if he's really interested in staying healthy or getting healthy again and getting back on the field. He's only played in 122 games in the last 2 seasons. He broke his finger in 2023, and he's had back injuries plaguing him throughout. He's hit 15 home runs in 2 years, 45 RBI, 76 OPS plus in 2023. I mean, that is the opposite of what Christ Bryant was and how he got that reputation. He kind of goes back to the 2015 season, where there was all the acrimony about not bringing him up, service time manipulation the Cubs played. They called him up 2 weeks into the season so they could get 1 extra year of control over him, as 6 years is not as good as 7 years when you're in the Cubs' perspective. But he talked about, things that went along with that was like the famous billboard which was just his face, and it said "worth the wait" on Addison between Clark and Sheffield. And he like says that bothered him. Like the pressure just from having a billboard there was just too much for him, even though he performed. He said about that, "I didn't know about that billboard it was going to be up there, but if I did, I probably would have been like, let's not do that. Let's just go out there and play ball and let me be who I am." It's just like, I guess I understand that. Maybe it'd be kind of weird to see yourself on a billboard and before you've ever played a major league game and have all of that on your shoulders, but he dealt with it. I mean, he won. They went to the NLCS in 2015. He was a rookie of the year. They won the World Series in 2016. He won the MVP of the National League. And it's like, now he doesn't even like baseball, and he's just going through the motions to collect his paycheck. And it just, I don't know. It's just sad to me from to see him at those heights and to be the legend that he was, and to see where he is now. I don't know. It's hard to feel too bad for someone that's got millions of dollars in the bank and many millions more coming to him. He just doesn't seem happy necessarily, and he kind of feels like the way he's putting things, he feels powerless, and I think that's misguided and disingenuous. He controlled all of this. He didn't do his research with the when he signed with the Rockies. He could have done that research. He could have put himself in any position. He could have been more active in how he was portrayed with the marketing department with the Cubs, but he didn't. He was soaking it up. And now that he's in the position he's at, he's talking, that was a problem for him. So I just feel like he's acting like all these things were out of his control when they really were. So it's a frustrating article. It's a sad article. It's something I thought we should at least talk about, considering how much time we spent over the years talking about Chris Bryant. It feels like this is one of the last times we're ever going to talk about him, the way his career has spiraled.
He's done. It is it's an interesting article. I mean, you would have thought when, he's asked about the Cubs situation, it would have been a little more ceremonious, is maybe the word I'm looking for, or ceremonial. Like you ended the drought of a world championship. You took baseball by storm despite this pressure. But like the first quote of the article from him is well, I wish things would have went a little bit differently there. And it's like, really? What? Yeah. I mean, because there was a billboard and you put pressure, and to your point, and everyone who saw it, you responded to it fine. You didn't break under the pressure.
It's kind of revisionist history.
Yeah.
I think it's revisionist history on his part. Like he's so beaten down by the sport that he just doesn't remember the joy or doesn't want to. So I don't know. And if that's the case, that's as sad as it gets.
It's interesting. You should read, I don't know if you saw it, but there's the Purple Row. It's the
500 5,280 feet.
The SB Nation, like.
Oh, purple. Yeah, they're referencing the row of seats in the upper deck at Rockies Park. That's exactly 1 mile above sea level.
That's the SB Nation portion of the site that covers the Rockies. And
I didn't even know they did that.
The Skylar Timmons kind of dissected the Athletic article, and he did it in such a manner that he kind of puts onus not just on Bryant and saying his comments are, kind of off-putting as a Rockies fan, but also he felt like when reading the article that the writer for the Athletic, whose name escapes me at the moment.
Yeah, I forgot that too.
Sam Blum.
Bad journalism on our part.
Sam Blum. Okay. That he put right here as a journal. This is Skylar SB Nation, Skylar Timmons. He says, and I read this article a little bit earlier today. He said, as a journalist, I've learned that context is everything. While reading Blum's article, something didn't mesh in my mind with what he was writing. In all honesty, it felt as if Blum did take some editorial liberties while interpreting Brian's comments. Could he have asked some clarifying questions? Absolutely. Could Brian also have considered his words more carefully? Definitely. So it seemed his interpretation of the article is that of reckless journalism to make a little bit more of a story out of something that may not be as big of a story. So I don't know.
That's very possible, but it does confirm, or at least it plays into narratives that we've talked about or we've felt all along with Bryant.
100%.
At least when he signed. So maybe that is bad journalism on the Athletics' part to kind of steer the story that way. If that's the case, I could also see, a Rockies fan has a very different perspective reading that article than a Cubs fan does. With everything that happened for the Cubs and nothing has happened for the Rockies. It's much like a Cubs, if an article is written about Javi Baez and a Cubs fan is reading it versus a Tigers fan reading, they're very similar in actually. So I happen to be both, so I can see both sides. But a Rockies fan has seen absolutely nothing out of this legend. So the frustration must be immense. So
yeah,
I don't know. I'm glad you brought that up because I hadn't seen that article, and it's good to hear from a Rockies perspective. And that's a very good point that I was kind of thinking of. I hadn't articulated it all, but that story, I'm wondering how happy or unhappy Chris Bryant is with how it actually came out, because that can easily be manipulated, just leaving out sections or not asking the right questions or just choosing to focus the article on one aspect and not others. So
yeah,
one way or the other, I would check out the article at least, but
definitely.
It's interesting. As with everything, I highly recommend The Athletic.
All right.
Well, I think that is it for this episode 142, unless you had anything else you wanted to add.
Nah, I forgot within my own segment, so that was good tonight. I'm growing. Good. I'm growing as a podcaster.
You are growing. We're only 5 years into this, and we're starting to figure it out.
Finally.
Maybe not. Actually, I don't think we're starting to figure this out at all. But we are getting a lot of traction on YouTube lately. So check out our YouTube channel at Major League A-Holes. Got a lot of views there. Hit subscribe. That's the one metric that helps us out the most. We got a ton of new subscribers recently, so appreciate that. This is also a podcast, of course. So you can find our podcast on any platform you'd like to. You can find all of it very easily on our new website, MajorLeagueAholes.com or SoxTypeThing.com. Try to make it as simple as possible to find our latest videos, latest episodes of the podcast. You can get to our old blog archive. It goes back, 11, 12, 13 years now.
Whatever
find our shop.
Whatever year Carlos Zambrano did what he did, which we can't remember exactly what it was, but
I think it was an idea of moving him to the bullpen at one point in 2011 or 2010. We could look that up.
Yeah,
it's there.
There's a specific action that if Carlos Zambrano did it, we agreed that we would start a blog, and it actually happened. It was an idea that was like partially outrageous, but plausible because it was Carlos Zambrano and it happened.
Thank you, Carlos Zambrano. You can thank everyone can thank Carlos Zambrano. That's why you're
Thank
seeing
you.
our ugly faces right now. Started a blog, eventually turned into a podcast, and now is a burgeoning YouTube channel. So check it all out. So we appreciate it. I think with that, we can declare this podcast is over. Peace.
Peace.
Word Hole Media.